let's get started. So, welcome everyone to the Unit 4 Head Start lecture for Business Management. I am Anandi and I will be your lecturer. I'll be going through the lecture today with you all. So, a little bit about me before we get started into the lecture for today. So, as I mentioned before, my name is Anandi. Hope everyone is enjoying your school holidays. I hope you've gotten up to some fun stuff, but also had a chance to, maybe catch up with some of your schoolwork, but definitely maintaining that balance is really important. I graduated in 2021, so a fair while ago, and I got an ATAR of 96.25. In business management, I received a 44, and then I also got a 40 plus study score in health and human development, further maths, and English. I am currently in my second year of commerce at the University of Melbourne, which I am enjoying very much. And that is my dog here. His name is Prince. And yeah, I love dogs. I'm an animal lover, but yeah, Prince is an absolute menace. So he's a very big cutie and he gets away with a lot of things. Okay, before I go into the lecture, just a little bit about ATAR Notes. So you might have heard about ATAR Notes. They provide a bunch of VCE resources for students like you who need a bit more support with, who might need a little bit of support with, their studies in year 12, since it can be a little bit challenging at times. But they provide a range of free resources, and these resources can range from study notes, lectures like these, even, articles, so many different examples, and you can see a bunch of these on the screen. And there's also other resources that they offer, such as online tutoring from very elite and experienced VC graduates. They also provide the study guides, which I know a lot of people used during many of you might be currently using them. They tend to be quite popular, and also Ed Unlimited, which is kind of like a Netflix but for all of the study guides. So it has all of your study guides in one online space, which makes it very easy for everyone to access. Anyway, so in terms of what our lecture or our class will be looking like for today, we'll have two content blocks. So the first content block will be looking at the first area study of Unit 4. And once we've completed that, our second content block will be looking at the second area study, so implementing change. So we'll be looking at all of Unit 4, since there are only 2 areas of studies. And yeah, we'll just divide those into 2 sections. If there are any questions that you have at all, please do put them into Slido. As you watch the lecture, I will be answering all of your questions. So any questions that you do have, do feel free to put them into the chat and I will be going through and answering them. Also, don't feel any rush to, jot everything down, or don't feel any stress in jotting everything down just because these slides are available to you. The recording is available to you, so you can always rewatch the recording, download the slides if you don't get everything written down, because we will be moving quite fast through the content just because we do have quite a bit to cover, since there are 2 areas of studies we have to get through. Okay, so the first unit, which is Unit 4, the first area of study in Unit 4 looks at the need for change. So this is directly sort of screenshotted from the study design. But let's have a read of what this little description is from Unit 4. So Unit 4 is looking at transforming a business. And in this, they highlight that businesses are under constant pressure to adapt and change to meet their objectives. In this unit, students consider the importance of reviewing key performance indicators to determine current performance and the strategic management necessary to position a business for the future. Students study a theoretical model to undertake and change and consider a variety of strategies to manage change in the most efficient and effective way to improve business performance. They investigate the importance of effective change management and leadership in change management. Using one or more contemporary business case studies from the past 4 years, students evaluate business practice against theory. So this generally gives you a bit of an insight in terms of what to expect when looking or when studying for Unit 4. And so the content of Unit 4 has a completely different focus compared to Unit 3, and that is the focus for Unit 4 is change. So now looking more closely at change. And Unit 1 looks at the need for change. Area Study 1 looks at the need for change, while Area Study 2 looks at actually implementing the change as well. Okay, so these are the dot points for Area Study 1. I'm not going to go through them extensively, but I'll give everyone maybe a couple of seconds just to have a read through them. Okay, hopefully that's enough time. But a lot of it is just having to do with sort of the strategies and ways that a business can actually identify the need for change. But we'll look at all of these a lot more closely when we in this content block. So, in terms of just understanding the idea of change, change in general is quite confronting and it makes people nervous. And as individuals, we get quite ingrained into our routines, and it can be challenging to accept the need for change, let alone even just, support it. Because, people like to stick with what they understand and what, is comfortable to them. And so moving from that state can be a bit confronting. And so it's very important to understand that when it does come to change, it's inevitable and it's ongoing. So it's not like, if you think about your personal life or even for businesses, they're not going to stay in one state. Things are going to keep happening, whether that be in their internal environment or external environment. Regardless, change will occur and you can't escape it. And so that kind of brings us to the idea of business change. So specifically looking at change in the context of businesses, this relates to a planned or unplanned response by an organization to an internal or external pressure that results in an alteration to the business. So basically what this definition is saying, it's just saying that change will occur where there is an internal or external pressure, and change can be planned or it can also be unplanned. And so this also brings us to the idea of reactive and proactive change. So reactive change is when a business, or it's when you act in response to a situation rather than, creating or controlling it. So an event has occurred and now you're reacting in response to that. That is a reactive approach to change. Whereas proactive is creating or controlling a situation rather than just responding to it after it has happened. So you're more so now taking more liberty or more initiative to control or create a situation rather than reacting to it after it's happened. So these terms might sound familiar to you because we did look at them in approaches to quality. Businesses can take a reactive or proactive approach to quality. Same kind of idea. So business can also take a reactive or proactive approach to change as well. And so how do we know when we need to change? A business will look at their key performance indicators, and that will help them to sort of make the decision that, okay, maybe we actually need to change. Maybe the specific key performance indicator is at a low or it's at a high, and that is suggesting us that things have to change. But we'll look at KPIs, and KPIs is a really important part of the study design. And so, yes, we will look at that in the next couple of slides. So in terms of just understanding what the better approach to change is, proactive would always be better, just because the business is, they're anticipating it. They're taking control of the situation, and they're, creating an event rather than acting in response to an event. Because reactive approaches to change, they might not necessarily have the resources. It often might be unprecedented. And so a business could be unprepared to actually deal with the change. So that's why proactive is always a better approach. Okay, looking at KPIs. So a key performance indicator is a criteria that can be used to assess the performance of a business in achieving their objectives over a period of time. And so in terms of the key parts of this definition, there are other acceptable terms you could use in this definition, and those are, you could say, KPIs is a measure, it's a set of data, it's a set of criteria. I think that's fairly flexible, just because that is taken from the examination report from past years. But you should never say a key performance indicator is an indicator, just because I feel like it's a fairly general rule that you would never, I guess, use the words that you're defining in the definition, right? So same kind of thing here. Okay, so our KPIs, we have quite a few. And so our first one is percentage of market share. So market share is the proportion of sales our business holds in a particular industry. Never say that market share is a share of the market. Again, comes to the idea of never using the word that you're defining in the definition. I think a better way of defining market share would just be saying that it's a proportion of sales a business holds in a particular industry. Then net profit is, so net profit figures, that's the difference between your revenue and expenses. That is the amount of revenue remaining after all expenses have been paid over a period of time. Rate of productivity growth. So you can kind of think of this like efficiency. It's the increase or decrease in output of the business over time compared to the amount of inputs used by the business. So it's literally kind of like efficiency, because productivity and efficiency are very closely linked. Sorry, I can't speak. But yeah, rate of productivity growth relates to, your outputs relative to the inputs that you use. Number of sales, fairly straightforward. So it's just the total amount of product that has been sold over a period of time. And then rates of staff absenteeism, a percentage indicating the number of work days lost due to unscheduled staff absence from work. So it's, note with this definition, it's the number of work days lost due to unscheduled staff absence from work. So important to just have a little bit with the wording there. Level of staff turnover is a measure of the employees who've left the organization over a period of time and require replacement. Really important that with this definition that you include the required replacement part, just because with staff turnover, I like to kind of think of it as like a circle. It's the number of employees who are leaving the business, but also the rate at which they're requiring to be replaced by the business. Because if employees are leaving the business, then the business needs to ensure that those employees are being replaced so that they can continue, producing sufficient output to reach their business objectives. Then level of wastage, that is the amount of underutilized or unused inputs, resources such as materials, storage, labor, and time within the production process. Number of customer complaints, the number of times customers have approached the business to express dissatisfaction of their goods/services. So it's literally just it relates to dissatisfaction of customers and the number of times they've actually come to the business and, alerted them of the dissatisfaction. So that's a really important part of that definition as well. It's not recorded as an official customer complaint if a customer hasn't actually gone back to the business or in some form contacted the business to alert them of the dissatisfaction. Because if you even think about it, if I went to, say, I went to McDonald's and I got a Happy Meal, but then I wasn't happy with my Happy Meal, ironic, um, but if I didn't actually go to McDonald's and tell them that, then they wouldn't record that as a customer complaint. And so that it's just important that, you in your definition underline that it's actually when customers go to the business, express their dissatisfaction of the goods and services. Okay, the next one is number of workplace accidents. That relates to the amount of unplanned events or incidents that interrupt workflow, which might include injury or property damage. And the number of website hits is the amount of times customers have visited or engaged with a business's website. Okay, important things to remember. We've kind of gone through a couple of these, but I'll go through them again with the definitions of your KPIs. So with level of staff turnover, it's the employees who leave the business but also require replacement. Level of wastage. Waste is the business's unused or underutilized inputs. So don't just say it's a business's material waste. That would be incorrect. Just, label it as unused or underutilized inputs, because inputs could relate to time, labor, material storage. So it's not just limited to material waste. Number of customer complaints, not just how many times the customer was dissatisfied, but how many times they told the business they were dissatisfied. So it kind of links to what I was talking about before. Number of workplace accidents. These are not just injuries. Workplace accidents are interruptions in workflow. So again, not just talking about one aspect of the definition, but just being really mindful of the wording and making sure that you incorporate all elements of the wording so that it's as accurate as possible. Okay, bit of an activity. Have a read of all of these 3 definitions, which there's one of these that have a mistake. So just have a note down and just think about which one has a mistake, and we'll go through them. Give everyone a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, let's have a look. So hopefully you've had a bit of a look through all of them. Let's go through all the definitions. So with A, this relates to the definition of wastage. If you recall, when we were going through all of the little reminders, when you are defining level of wastage, it's important for you to not just say materials, because remember, inputs can relate to money, labor, time, etc. So in this case, they've said level of wastage refers to the amount of materials that are underutilized or unused throughout the production process. However, that's not true, because wastage doesn't always have to be materials. It could be wasted time, it could be wasted labor, it could be wasted money, etc. The list can go on. And so the way that you may fix that definition is just by saying it refers to the amount of inputs, and then maybe give a couple of examples that are unused or underutilized. Okay. Again, another quick spot the mistake. One of these are incorrect. Okay, let's have a look. Hopefully you've had a look, read through all of them. So B, number of customer complaints refers to the quantity of customers who are dissatisfied with the business's product or service. Again, really important with this definition is that dissatisfaction is not a KPI. It's only when the business is alerted to that dissatisfaction, be it verbally or in written form. So that's when it's officially recorded as a customer complaint. And so the way that you may fix this definition is by saying number of customer complaints refers to the quantity of customers who alert the business to their dissatisfaction. Okay, amazing. So with our KPIs, these allow a business to identify its problem areas. So to see, where are areas that might be problematic, where are areas that it might need to improve upon, and then actually develop new strategies to address those areas. And then once that's done, reassess these areas to see if these strategies effectively achieve their objectives. And so kind of follows this stage is that they first need to assess their KPIs, see what KPIs might indicate a need for change, and then actually implement that change, develop some strategies to be implemented into the business. Once those strategies have been implemented, in order to assess the effectiveness of those strategies, they would want to reassess or revisit those KPIs, the original KPIs, and see if there's been a change in the KPI. So maybe, was there a decrease in number of customer complaints? And so if there was a decrease, that would suggest that the change that was implemented was effective. Okay. All right, now moving on to Lewin's force field analysis theory. So Lewin's force field analysis theory proposes that situations are maintained by an equilibrium between driving forces that push change to occur and restraining forces that hinder a block change from occurring. So basically this theory underlines that in a situation there will always be driving forces which push change or which encourage change to occur, and then restraining forces which sort of hinder change from occurring. And so it's a situation is the way it is because of these interactions. And we call these counteracting forces because driving force is what is encouraging change, restraining forces is kind of blocking the change from occurring. And I kind of like to think of it as like a car because you can think of, your driving forces as the accelerator, your restraining forces as the brake. And so in terms of a situation and if change is likely to occur, that's when your driving forces will be more than your restraining forces. So if a car is to move forward, your acceleration has to be more than your brake, right? But then the moment that you hit the brake or the moment that your brake overpowers, your acceleration, that is going to bring the vehicle to a stop. And so it's the same sort of idea that when your restraining forces actually overpower your driving forces, that suggests that change is unlikely to occur. And so it's all about these two counteracting forces, and really change depends on which force overpowers the others. So, for example, you've proposed a new change to your business. And so, like we established before, our driving forces are the factors affecting the situation that propel it in a direction that cause and / support the change. And then with our restraining forces, these are the factors that resist the direction of driving forces and act to actually decrease them, which ultimately blocks the proposed change from occurring. But then if the driving forces are more dominant or if they overpower our restraining forces, then our proposed change will be successful. There will be a higher chance that whatever change that we would like to implement will be successful. On the other hand, where our restraining forces overwhelm our driving forces, this will mean that the proposed change is unlikely to be successfully implemented, and the business will need to develop an action plan to minimize the strength of restraining forces so that driving forces are maximized and then change can occur. If you're in a situation where both of these forces are in an equilibrium, meaning that there's the same weight, the same number, or we have the same strength of driving forces and the same strength of restraining forces, then no change will occur. The situation will stay the same and the proposal will not go through. So you can just kind of think of it like it's only where your driving forces overpower your restraining forces when change will occur. So with this theory, there are three main principles. The first principle is that if driving forces are met by restraining forces at a similar level, it is likely change will be unsuccessful. So we kind of talked about that before. The second principle is that when driving forces are more dominant, business change will likely to be successful. And then the third principle is that if restraining forces overwhelm the driving forces, or they're greater than the driving forces, it will be unlikely that change will be successful, and then the business will need to develop that action plan to reduce the strength of its restraining forces. Okay, so in terms of our driving and restraining forces, these are the whole heap that we need to actually know. And since they've been explicitly listed by BICA and they've been explicitly listed in the study design, we need to know them individually. So do make sure that you are familiar with all of the driving forces and restraining forces. So with our driving forces, we have owners, we have managers, employees, competitors, legislation, pursuit of profit, reduction of costs, globalization, technology, innovation, and social attitudes. And then with restraining forces, we have managers, time, organizational inertia, legislation, and financial considerations. So we'll go through all of them and what they actually mean a little bit more closely. So with our driving forces, managers, they are in an influential position of leadership at a business. And so they would need to, share ideas and expertise in order to increase capacity and the support for change across the business. And so wherever there is a change being proposed, it's likely that, they would support it because maybe that change would reflect on them positively, especially if it helps a business, improve its KPIs, allow it to achieve its business objectives. And if a business is successful, then it would reflect positively on managers. And so if a proposed change has the potential to do that, then managers would, in that case, be a driving force because, they would benefit by that. Okay, with employees, employees that support change will help to successfully implement it into the business and encourage others to support it. To encourage their support, use participative management to make employees feel included and gather feedback. An example where employees might be a driving force is potential change that is introduced might mean that it might increase the responsibility of employees, might give them more experience, it might upskill them. In that case, they would be a driving force for change because it positively impacts them. It upskills them. Maybe it might allow them to, they might be compensated more. So in that case, there would be a driving force. With competitors, so to keep a competitive advantage, a business must build and retain a competitive advantage. So it's really important that business monitors the actions of its competitors. And again, it comes to the idea of proactive change. So it's about getting ahead of your competition instead of chasing after them. So it's not reacting after a competitor has introduced a new product. That would be reactive change. It's about getting ahead of them and doing that before them so that, you're seen as like a leading business in your industry. And so that competitors can be a driving force so that a business, might want to get ahead of them or, implement proactive change. So in that case, trying to establish a competitive advantage, that could be a reason why they are a driving force. Okay, legislation. So legislative changes are the alterations to the laws and rules that affect a business's actions. So a lot of the times well, legislation has a significant impact on the way businesses operate, because laws that are laws mean that businesses are legally required to implement and enforce particular ways and methods into, their structure. And so that might be a driving force, is that if there's new legislation that comes out, businesses are legally obliged to actually fulfill those requirements. Pursuit of profit, that just relates to, business growth, long-term survival. So if change actually promotes that, then pursuit of profit would be a driving force. Reduction in costs. So as the name suggests, it's just about saving on your expenses. So if a change, maybe by implementing technology, that would reduce labor costs, it would reduce, maybe, material costs in other areas, but the key one would be labor costs. That would be a driving force, because even though technology might have short-term costs, in the long term, it might be more financially beneficial. Then globalization. So this is all about going global, more market share, global expansion. And so that are some ways that it could be a driving force. Technology. So technology has a lot of benefits. So implementing that into the business allows them to be up to date with technological changes, allow businesses to experience these benefits, and also kind of links to the idea of competitive advantage. So being up to date with current trends and current ways of doing things and being more efficient. Innovation. So this is all about introducing or modifying current processes, products, or ideas with the intention of increasing the likelihood of business success. And so innovation allows a business to be more distinctive, stand out in the market, giving them a competitive advantage, meaning that, maybe more customers are going to be going to them, allowing them to increase their market share and get more profit. Social attitudes as well is quite a key one, because social attitudes are always changing. And so it's important that business is up to date with this, so that they can implement this, or that social attitudes are reflected in the way that the business is operating. So for example, societal demands tend to be, flexible parental working hours, sustainable production, having positive impacts in the community, all of those things. So that can be driving way these forces could drive or push for change. Then we have our restraining forces. So this is when forces will hinder change from occurring. So with managers, because they're in a position of influence, they might refuse to implement change or support the change. And when they choose to, not support change, it's likely that it will be unsuccessful, since managers are a key driver for change to occur. And so they might resist change if it threatens their job, or if they feel like they lack the skills or expertise to implement it successfully. So if they feel like the change kind of expands their skills or goes above their skills or expertise, or if they feel insecure about actually successfully implementing the change, then it's likely they're going to resist it because of that reason. Employees can also be a restraining force. And for example, with the example I used before with technology, they might be a restraining force to technology, because it means that, they might potentially be let off. They're going to fear their job security, and in that sense, they wouldn't want the change to occur, because they might lose their job. Time can also be a restraining force, because depending on the amount of time that a business has to carry out a change, can, I guess, dictate, how successful it is. So if there is a lack of time, that means that business may not be able to adapt quickly enough to a constant changing industry. It might lead to the business falling behind competitors in the industry, risking a loss of market share and loss of revenue. So again, it comes to the idea of just being proactive to avoid that situation. Organizational inertia. This is the business's ability to react internal or external pressures to change, and because they favor continuing with their current well-entrenched trajectory, makes implementing long-term change difficult. So organizational inertia is basically the idea of whatever the business is currently doing, they find comfort in that. And that makes them very resistant, or it makes them very dismissive, very resistant to do something else. So it kind of links to the idea of change. They find comfort in their current trajectory, and so implementing long-term change makes it difficult because they just are so used to what they're currently doing. Legislation can be a resisting or restraining force because it might make things expensive. Unexpected legislation may be beyond manageable, resulting in high levels of resistance, and a proposed change might be blocked by existing legislation as well. So it might be that if a change is proposed legally, they might not be able to carry that out because of legislation. So for example, there's a lot of legislations around like health and safety standards. So if a business were to, build a whole, like something to do, if a business were to introduce a change and that maybe didn't comply with health and safety standards, then that change would not be able to go through because of legislation. So a good example would be like if a business wanted to increase the number of hours employees had to work per week. There is legislation to protect employee rights, and so that potentially would be illegal by increasing the number of hours employees would work because there's only minimum number of hours employees have to work for. But yeah, that's just an example, but you kind of get the idea. Financial considerations. So businesses are limited by what they can afford. So in the sense that if the change is excessively expensive, then it would be difficult to successfully implement. And so the steps of the force field analysis, all about just proposing change, identifying driving and restraining forces, weighing these driving and restraining forces based on their strength, and then developing strategies to minimize these restraining forces and to maximize the driving forces as well. So what we talked about before. All right, and that brings us to Porter's generic strategies. So Porter's generic strategies is a framework of strategic management that describes how a business may proactively seek a competitive advantage in the industry. So now we're looking more so at competitive advantage and what are the ways that a business could seek competitive advantage. So according to this theory, a business can gain a competitive advantage in two ways. One way is that they can become a low-cost producer, or another way is through innovation, or specifically through differentiation, and that just setting themselves apart from its competitors. So looking at the lower cost approach, the lower cost approach is where the business aims to gain a competitive advantage by becoming the lowest cost producer in its industry. So it's not about just getting the best deal for the consumer. It's about the business becoming the lowest cost producer. And because they are the lowest cost producer, they're able to pass on those savings to the consumer. And so the competitive advantage they're specifically getting is that the business will allow it to sell its offering at a lower than average price while also maintaining its profit levels. The second way is that the business can sell at normal price but increase its profit margin. So because it's selling at normal price, it's keeping its expenses to a low, and so in that way they're able to increase its profit margins because they're selling it at a normal price, but then their expenses are, since they are the lowest cost producer, their expenses are extremely low, which allows them to obtain higher profit margins. Okay, how might a business implement a low cost approach? So there are multiple ways where a business could do so. It's just about thinking when you are thinking about this question, it's just about seeing where are areas that a business can reduce its costs or reduce its expenses. So one way is implementing technology, and that allows the business to save on labor costs. It reduces waste. It allows things to occur a lot more quicker with greater precision and speed. Buying raw materials from the lowest cost source. And so that would relate to, the suppliers, just finding cheaper suppliers, implementing lean management, so having less waste but more value. Then outsourcing non-core tasks and manufacturing overseas to reduce labor costs. So in outsourcing, they might outsource their website development or their marketing, but those non-essential or non-core tasks. And then also offering high volumes of standardized goods / services. So kind of like bulk buying that allows a lot of savings. A good example of that is Costco. So a lot of the things that they sell is in high volume, not value. And then also reducing storage costs through just-in-time. So yeah, just-in-time, as you would have learnt about in Unit 3 or Study 3, is a materials management strategy. So it's all about just getting through inventory and delivering goods just as they're needed for production. Okay, advantages and disadvantages. So with lower cost approach, advantages is that it allows a business to have strong competitive advantage in markets with price-conscious consumers. So this approach appeals to price-conscious consumers, and that ultimately leads to an increase in market share. Also allows greater profit, increase business growth as well. So in both of the ways that they get competitive advantage, they're increasing their profit, they're increasing the profit that they get, and so allows them to grow a lot more quicker. And the disadvantages is that potentially lower customer loyalty, just because price-conscious consumers aren't very loyal consumers. They just go to wherever has the lowest price, and so that they can easily be substituted for a competitor that offers lower prices. Customer might also associate low prices with lower quality products, and so that could deter a lot of the consumers to buy from businesses that use the lower cost approach. While standardized products are easier and cheaper to produce, they might not meet the demands of customers who want creative and unique tailor-made products. So that's a key thing, is that with lower cost approach, a lot of the goods that you're making tend to be standardized. And so you're not really appealing to the consumers who want more tailored and unique products. Okay, then we have differentiation. So differentiation is an approach that involves a business developing the uniqueness of its good or service, using innovation and creativity to establish a competitive advantage. And so it's just looking at being very distinct and doing things in a very distinct manner through innovation. And so the competitive advantage that businesses will be getting through the differentiation approach is that the business will be able to sell a unique product that consumers cannot purchase from anywhere else and can charge a premium price on that product. So since that business is the only one selling that product, they can actually capitalize and take advantage of that by charging a higher price on that product, because they know that consumers can't get that product anywhere else. And so where might a business actually differentiate itself from competitors? Again, many, many ways. So one key way is through innovation, by coming up with new ideas, new methods to do things, creating new and unheard of goods and services, and then also creating new and attractive product features. So maybe with existing things within the market, just taking that and building upon it to improve the features of that product. They could also maybe think about the way that they brand themselves or they market themselves, present themselves to the public. So maybe an endorsement by a celebrity or expert, warranties, after-sales services or loyalty cards, the consumer's purchasing experience, the way that product is sold by the retail store itself. So like when a consumer walks into the doors of that business, is that experience very unique for them? Do they feel very special compared to another store that they walk into where they might be treated very rudely or, feeling ignored? So that's an example of differentiation, because the business is ensuring that the customer, they're using differentiation through the experience they are providing to their consumer. And also effective marketing that differentiates the business through branding. So, where might a business differentiate itself from competitors? You can kind of see that all of these brands that I've put up, whenever you, like, even through the logo, you get like a different feeling through all of them. So with Gucci, it's giving more like luxury, it's giving more, very posh, very sophisticated, very expensive. And then with Nike, it's a lot more like casual, sporty. Again, but like there is that expense to it, but it's like, it's a lot more, it's a lot more sporty, it's a lot more casual compared to Gucci, which was a lot more posh, a lot more like luxury. So that's just an example. Okay, advantages and disadvantages. So with differentiation, a key advantage is through that business's ability to charge premium prices because products can't be purchased elsewhere. And so it's going to give them a lot of profit because they can do that. Gives them also a strong competitive advantage just because in markets that they operate in markets that have brand loyal consumers. And so a lot of their consumers will be brand loyal and that will increase their market share. And so it makes sense that they're brand loyal just because that business is the only one, providing that unique product or service. And so these consumers can't buy anywhere else but from that business. So they'll be continuing to buy from that business. Also very accessible for any kind of business, so regardless of the size, so both small and large businesses. The key disadvantages is that it might not appeal to price-conscious consumers just because these consumers are very unwilling to pay a premium price. Products' unique features can also be replicated or mimicked by competitors. So no more competitive advantage. This is a really important point because while in the short term, when a business comes up with a very new, unique product, and while that might allow them to have brand loyalty initially, competitors are going to be watching, the businesses around them. And so they are going to see that, okay, this business has introduced a new ice cream flavor and it's very unique and consumers love it, and they're, going up to the business and they're getting, a lot of customers buy that. And so competitors are now going to be like, okay, we need to also, introduce, a very similar ice cream flavor to appeal to these consumers, to now not steal these customers, but maybe like appeal to these customers as well so that they come buy from us. And so it's very likely that, competitors will replicate or mimic the features of, that business's successful good or service. And that means that there's no more competitive advantage. So it's very easy for competitors to, I guess, come out with very similar products after the business has done that. Okay, in terms of comparing Porter's generic strategies, so both have the similarity of sort of striving to obtain the same goal of competitive advantage to increase market share and profit. The differences, however, is that lower cost sells their products at below industry average prices. Differentiation sells their products at premium prices. And then the idea of the way that they actually invest their money. So differentiation involves investment into innovation. Lower cost involves investment into cost reduction, such as technology or lean management. Differentiation also appeals to brand loyal consumers, and then lower cost appeals more so to price conscious consumers. So That last one looking at the type of consumers you appeal to. The second one looking at the investment, so where the funds are directed into. And the first one looking at the way that they set the prices. So there are a variety of brands I put on the screen again. You can kind of tell with every brand that you see, you can you can kind of see or think about if they're low cost or if they're differentiation. So like Big W, Kmart, Target would be more so lower cost. But Target's an interesting one because if you choose both strategies, you will be mediocre at both. So Target tried to rebrand themselves as a more high-end clothing department in recent years, increasing prices. Only it hasn't worked. People just don't associate Target with higher end differentiated products. And so Target have been quite confused. They haven't been able to make a clear decision. They're like, should I be a low-cost producer and compete with Kmart and Big W, or should I be more high-end and compete with Maya and David Jones? And so they've kind of tried to go for that middle ground, and the consequence is just Target. So it's really important that you put all your resources, time and effort into only one strategy. So business has to choose either one, either or. Okay, mark the answer. Have a read of this answer, and then we'll go through this together. Sorry, I'm just having a look. Cool. Yeah, give everyone a couple of minutes to have a look. In your head, think about how much you would mark the answer. Okay, let's have a look. So with this one, it's asking us to identify and describe two driving forces that might be affecting HitBig. Worth 4 marks. So this one would be a 2 out of 4, and let's have a look why. So the first part of the answer, they are saying that two driving forces acting upon HitBig are pursuit of profit and competitors. Pursuit of profit meaning the revenue remaining after all expenses have been paid is essential for businesses as it is profit that allows them to grow, fulfill owner and shareholder expectations, and survive. So pursuit of profit was not specifically explained in relation to HitBig's change, which was investment in online shopping. So kind of links to the idea of being very specific of your whatever you're talking about. So it's not enough to just include the definition. It's really important. The core of your marks and a lot of the marks of your answers will be attributed towards your specificity and how relevant your answer is to the case study. So, yep, in order to retain profits in a shifting market, HitBig must retain sales and sales revenue and adapt to changing consumer preferences by investing in online shopping. So that would be a better, a better way to improve this response. The last part is better. Then it's explained better than profit, but shares a very similar shares a very similar problem that pursuit of profit had as well. It does not explain what a driving force is. It's a factor that just propels and pushes a business towards change. So it's also important that you define key terms in your answer as well. So that is very important. It doesn't necessarily define the term driving force as well. So I guess that's key part of why some marks are lost. Do the same for this one. So give everyone a couple of minutes again, have a read, and then mark this out of 3. So this one, also 2 out of 3. In terms of how this question would be broken down, the identify part would be 1 mark, and then your describe part would be 2 marks. So they got 1 out of 1 they got 1 mark. So for identifying a strategy, but they didn't define lower cost properly. So they said that lower cost refers to when a business sells its products at the cheapest price relative to its competitors. It's not selling at a lower cost, it's producing at a lower cost. And because they're producing, they're able to, producing at a lower cost, they're able to, pass those savings onto its consumers, but that's not the main part of their lower cost strategy. The key part of lower cost is producing at a lower cost, saving its expenses so that they're able to be the lower cost producer in an industry. They overall got 1 out of 2 for describe just because the definition was incorrect. I would say that's probably the main part. Close to 0, but linked to competitive advantage / sales well. Okay, let us move on to the second content block. So this is now looking at our Area Study 2, Unit 4. And if we have a quick read, on the completion of this unit, the student should be able to discuss the importance of effective management, strategies and leadership in change, evaluate the effectiveness of a variety of strategies used by managers to implement change, and discuss the effect on change on stakeholders of a business. And so give everyone maybe a couple of seconds just to read over the key knowledge points. Okay, let's have a look. So, leadership during change. So, leadership is all about the ability to influence and motivate individuals to achieve business objectives. So, as we know, change can be a very difficult process for a lot of people, for many stakeholders, because you are moving from a current state to a new and unfamiliar state. And so, in order to mitigate these challenges, leadership is important to help and support stakeholders and people within the business through this transition. And so, specifically during change, leadership can really help to build momentum towards successful change, to help reduce resistance to change. So, by making people feel supported, by offering support, by offering help, it allows people to feel more comfortable and maybe be more inviting towards change, therefore, reducing resistance. And even direct the business and its stakeholders towards the same goals. So, sort of aligning the goals of stakeholders and businesses so that they're achieving the same thing and therefore, enhancing business outcomes as well. Looking at a leader more closely, so the workings of an effective leader. So, a leader is someone who is, inspiring and motivating through encouragement, support, and recognition. So it's not like they're autocratic, they're not telling people what to do. It's rather they're fostering an encouraging environment, making everyone feel supported and recognized, and, having that vision to make correct decisions. So it's also just about whatever decisions that the leader makes, it's sort of them reflecting, or whatever decisions that are made for, to achieve a particular vision. So, those decisions will help or support or facilitate the achievement of a vision. And so, yeah, it kind of links to having emotional intelligence as well. So, sort of understanding others in the business, having the emotional capability and skills to recognize how other people are feeling. And I guess that also links with, supporting and recognizing and encouraging those within the business. So all of these skills sort of work together, I would say. But yeah, there are key workings of an effective leader. So in essence, it's just someone who inspires others to follow in their lead. So it's someone that people will look up to in the business and sort of aspire to become like. So, what are some important roles of a leader during change management? So, a key one is communicating the need for change. So, by doing so, they're able to build the momentum and to even support firsthand if people are, uncertain or have any, uncertainties or clarifications, all of that. It's also about empowering employees in order to develop a shared vision of change, increasing ownership of and commitment to the change. So by empowering employees, they are, putting employees in a position where they feel greater responsibility and more ownership, and that will allow them to be a lot more committed if they feel like they're directly involved in particular change. It's also about being transparent and honestly communicating details of the change, reducing the fear of the unknown. So they shouldn't be misleading in any sense, just because if they mislead their employees and then when the change occurs and then employees are like, okay, I wasn't notified of this, I didn't know that my job, responsibilities would change, they're going to feel betrayed, there's going to be a loss of trust, there's going to be an impact on the relationship that they have with management and the business. And so in that sense, it can be a little bit dissettling and unsettling for that employee. It's really important that the leader is transparent and they're, honestly communicating details of the change, just so that they're able to adequately support the employee, but also so that employee knows how the change will affect them as well. Then it's about using interpersonal skills to empathize with employees and other stakeholders, also reducing their stress and resistance. So I guess a lot of it kind of links to what we were looking at before in terms of having that emotional intelligence, being very empowering, recognizing, and supporting. But just, yeah, taking those things and being a bit more specific, I would say, is what this slide is doing. And yeah, even though, these are general ways of wording how a leader is important during change management, whenever you are given a question in the case study, in your exam or SAC, it's really important that you are specific to the case study. So read the case study, see if there's any specific examples of, that shows why a leader is important during change. Highlight that so that you remember to talk about that. Really important things. Okay, now looking at strategies to respond to KPIs. So Vika wants us to know these management strategies when looking at KPIs. And so, again, they have been listed explicitly in the study design, so you can't get away with knowing a couple of them. It's important that you do make the effort to have a solid understanding for all of them. So we have staff training, staff motivation, change of management styles or management skills, increased investment in technology, improving quality and production, cost cutting, initiating lean production techniques, innovation, global sourcing of inputs, overseas manufacturing, and also global outsourcing. And again, a bit of a reminder, these are the 10 KPIs that we are required to know. So in terms of this dot point, these are all strategies that a business can use to respond to KPIs. So if a business identifies that, okay, my net profit figures are significantly low, what the business can use one of these strategies to address their net profit figures, for example. So they might use cost cutting as an example to address that KPI. So that's sort of how these two things are related. But we'll go through all of these strategies and look at how they're relevant to KPIs. So staff training is all about, actually it's fairly straightforward, but it's all about, training your staff, ensuring that the business provides opportunities for staff to be upskilled and to increase their knowledge so that they're able to complete their jobs and duties to a higher standard. And so in staff training and how it's relevant to KPIs, you could kind of link it to pretty much all of them. So you could talk about staff absenteeism, turnover, rate of productivity growth, number of workplace accidents, number of customer complaints. Before I go into this screen, I actually want you guys to have a bit of a think about how they're related. So even if you have a pen and paper next to you, write down all of these KPIs that I have on the screen and kind of tell me how they're linked, or briefly think about how staff training could be used to respond to staff absenteeism, or what's the link between the KPIs. Give everyone a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, let's have a look. So in terms of staff absenteeism and turnover, so employees who are trained, they're going to feel valued and appreciated by the business, which means that they might feel obliged, or they're more likely to stay within the business, and that helps to increase the motivation. So that would subsequently reduce absenteeism and turnover. Also, rate of productivity growth, because trained, motivated employees are productive. They're going to achieve better business outcomes, make the business more productive. If employees are trained, they're less likely to be responsible for workplace accidents. And then if employees are well trained, they know what they're doing, they're going to make less mistakes, and that might reduce the number of customer complaints from customers. Staff motivation. Again, going to give everyone a couple of seconds just to have a think about how we could link staff motivation to these KPIs. But just thinking about, when staff are motivated, that means that they have that inherent desire to, work and to achieve a particular outcome. Okay, let's have a look. So with this one, if employees are motivated, they're going to be less likely to leave the business or to not come to work or to not arrive at work. Yeah, so they're less likely to show up for scheduled work, less likely to leave the business. They're more likely to come up to scheduled work and to stay inside the business, which means that their absenteeism and turnover is going to reduce. Motivated employees are productive, meaning that businesses are also going to be productive. They're going to have the desire to actually do well. Ways to motivate staff. So the business could, have recognition and rewards. So make employees feel more recognized. Use the systematic appraisal system, maybe performance-related pay. Setting interesting and challenging work, to provide that element of stimulation to staff. Maybe even implement policies that help make the workplace feel like a safer place. Okay, again, same thing for a change of management styles and management skills. Have a look at this. Okay, so your choice of management style depends on the nature of tasks, time available, experience of employees, and management preference. So this was all from Area Study 1 and Unit 3. And so what your KPIs indicate you need more or less of, that would depend on your choice of management style. In terms of if a business has high staff turnover, that means they need to motivate their employees. And so that's when a participative or consultative management style could be used. Even like delegation to empower employees or communication to get their feedback in terms of management skills could also be implemented. And in terms of productivity growth, again, motivation is really important. So delegation, participative or consultative management, putting greater focus on planning and decision making would also be very important as well. In terms of technology, so increase investment in technology. So we have productivity growth. So technology, as we know, is a lot more fast, it's efficient, it's effective. So we're going to improve our efficiency and productivity. It's going to help us increase the number of sales and percentage of market share because it allows greater accessibility through websites, for example. And so that means customers are able to access a website from anywhere, regardless of their geographical location, anytime. That's going to help increase sales. Also, improved efficiency. There's more to sell from equal/less inputs, greater sales, greater market share. Level of wastage. So, greater efficiency. Technology saves on time, and so there's less waste. Number of customer complaints. Since it's a lot more accurate, there's less mistakes being made, which means that customers are less likely to get defects or be satisfied with their products. Number of workplace accidents. So we could say that dangerous tasks could be replaced by robots, and that might result in less injuries. All right, improving quality in production. So this also appeals to a variety of KPIs. Improving quality will help to increase customer satisfaction, which might mean that sales are going to increase and therefore a greater percentage of market share. It will also help to reduce customer complaints since they're getting a higher quality product, and decrease waste as well, because high wastage can be a sign of low quality production. Strategies to implement quality are your quality management strategies. So what we looked at before, the three ones: TQM, quality assurance, and quality control. But then you also think about other ones such as lean management, and then also training of managers and employees. So for example, with lean management, you can think about zero defects. That's about achieving perfection in production. But yeah, that are some examples. Then we have cost cutting. So cost cutting is just all about reducing expenses. If we reduce our expenses, if we cut our costs, it increases our profit. And so these are some major cost cutting strategies that a business could implement. So lowering salary costs, outsourcing, overseas manufacturing, replacing labor with technological developments. These are just some examples, but I think you could think of a lot more. Reducing wastage as well, lean management, and even buying from cheaper suppliers and using a lot more green energy and lowering energy costs. So using maybe solar panels, renewable energy sources, that would be good examples as well. Then we have our lean production techniques. So lean management is an approach that aims to maximize value while decreasing waste. So maximizing value is all about if the customer, it's surrounding the idea that if a customer finds a product of suitable value, they won't be complaining about it because it achieves their quality expectations, and an increase in the value will help to increase customer satisfaction. Again, more sales, more market share, more profit. Decreasing waste is important because waste is very costly, it's unproductive, and so this is good for profit and productivity if you decrease it, and will also help, reduce the level of wastage. Then we have redeployment of resources, natural, labor, and capital. There are three resources that can be deployed. We have natural, and that looks at using existing resources for different purposes. So reduction in waste due to a more efficient and effective use of natural resources. Then we have labor, moving employees to different places within the business. So you might take, employees from the marketing department to the finance department, for example, and it keeps knowledgeable staff while reducing turnover. So maybe it keeps things interesting because now they're doing something that they don't normally do. It might help to increase their motivation by giving them an element of challenge. Then we have capital, so machinery and buildings. This is moving production overseas, for example, to take advantage of cheap labor. So you're now looking at bigger scale things with capital. Okay, then we have innovation. Innovation is the introduction of or modification of processes, products, or ideas with the intention of increasing the likelihood of business success. So very, very, very similar to what we just looked at in Porter's generic strategies in terms of differentiation. So it's just about being unique and introducing unique ways of doing things, products, services, whatever it might be. So effective and unique innovation can have significant impacts if customers like the way the business has used innovation, for example, through product differentiation or branding. They're more likely to be loyal to their business, and that will help to improve, the KPIs of profit. It's going to mean that the business is more successful, their market share reduces customer complaints, productivity growth, even number of website hits. Maybe business customers are buying from the website directly, so they're engaging with that a lot more. Okay, global sourcing of inputs. So global sourcing of inputs is when a business imports the resources they require for the production process from an overseas or non-Australian organization. You would have remembered this from, I think, the last area of study we looked at, area study 3. But the advantage of this is that it allows the business to take advantage of cheaper input costs from some countries, accessing skills and resources that might not be available domestically, or even learn how to do business in another market. The disadvantage is that arrival of goods to Australia take a lot more time. So obviously now there's a geographical distance, so it's going to take a lot more time since it's further away from Australia. It's also difficult to return, a lot more costly due to taxes, laws, currency conversions. It can also be hard to monitor the behavior of suppliers and ensure that they're operating in an ethical manner. And if they don't operate in an ethical manner, that's going to damage the business's reputation. There's also a loss of control and a loss of Australian jobs as well. Then we have overseas manufacturing. This is when the entire production process occurs overseas and outside of Australia. And the advantages and disadvantages are fairly similar. So it will allow the business to take advantage of cheaper labor costs in some countries, allow them to access greater expertise or economies of scales in some countries, and also just like it's a good opportunity for them to learn how to do business in another market. The disadvantages, however, is that there can be a lot of hidden costs, taxes, laws, currency conversions, and again, loss of control, loss of Australian jobs, and it can be a lot more difficult to operate or to monitor how those producers are operating. So are they, using sweatshops? Are they treating their workers appropriately? Do they have, sufficient or adequate working conditions? That business will never know because they can't monitor that. So there's that loss of control. And then we have global outsourcing. This is when a business uses other organizations from outside of Australia to undertake non-production related business functions. So it's really important that you understand that it's non-production related. So it's just a non-core business function. So these are just some examples. It could be telecommunication, could be marketing, it could be website development, it could be information technology, accounting, and some examples. Sorry, not some examples. The advantages and disadvantages of these is that with labor costs, so if a country outsources its marketing, for example, that might help them to save on the labor costs because maybe in that country, the minimum wage is a lot lower than Australia. Some countries have expertise in certain fields. So a lot of businesses outsource like software development to India just because India has a lot of expertise and a lot of employees and people within the country that hold a lot of knowledge in like software development and information technology. And so, yeah. Businesses can also focus on its core activities. So by outsourcing its non-core activities, it allows them to focus more so on the core activities. Disadvantages is that it's difficult to ensure ethical behavior of these businesses. There's again a loss of Australian jobs and a loss of control as well. And yeah, loss of intellectual property. Okay, now we have Senge's learning organization. All right, so with Senge's learning organization, this proposes that businesses are flexible, they're adaptive and productive during periods of change. And so these businesses that are flexible, adaptive, and productive will be a lot more successful in implementing change. And so with Senge's learning organization, it operates on 5 key principles. That is personal mastery, building a shared vision, team learning, systems thinking, and mental models. So these are the 5 key disciplines that this theory kind of builds upon and looks at. So when understanding these disciplines, mental models is all about the deeply ingrained assumptions that influence one's understanding of the world. So it's sort of like, employees should challenge old assumptions to generate new ideas. So it's just about kind of challenging traditional, deeply ingrained assumptions that, influence your perception and your understanding of the world. And so that should be challenged in order to generate new ideas, in order to, move to a new state and to, facilitate greater thinking. Personal mastery. So this is when an individual should be committed to self-improvement. It's all about self-improvement, continuously learning from self-reflection, And by doing that, you're able to learn faster. So as the name suggests, it's just becoming a master over your skills. So the way that you're able to achieve that is through, having that commitment to improve yourself, and also having, that constant self-reflection. Then we have building shared vision. So this is where a business with a shared vision is one that has aligned all people within the business towards the same goals. So it's just the idea that a shared vision is one where everyone within that business is achieving or is aligned to achieve, the same goal. And so if everyone in the business is achieving that same goal, you have that shared vision. You could even think about in your own life with school and how, maybe if there was a group project, you have the same goal of, maybe your goal is to, conduct a very good team presentation, and everyone in the group, wants to get really good results. And so in that way, since everyone has the same goal, you're building that shared vision, because everyone maybe wants to get an 80% or like a 90%. And so there's that shared vision that's being created. And then we have team learning. So this is the process which a team's capacity to create desired results is developed, creating an environment where knowledge is shared, build upon personal mastery and shared vision. So you can kind of think of team learning as a combination of personal mastery and building a shared vision, because it really is. It's about that holistic setting where everyone is involved and committed to become better. So it's kind of just like personal mastery in like a group setting. So yeah, team's capacity to get those desired results, have that shared vision, build, be better, do better, all of that. And then systems thinking is basically the overarching discipline that links to all of those other disciplines. So it's just the idea of viewing the business as a very whole, complex system, a very holistic perception of the business, rather than a breakdown of its separate parts. So rather than seeing a business through its, finance department, its marketing department, its customer service department, its frontline workers, all of that, you kind of just see it as a holistic, interrelated, complex system, and how each part of the business relates to another section of the business. So just seeing it as one, basically. All right, let's have a look at a practice question. I'll let you guys have a go at this. So outline how a business might use Senge's learning organization to successfully implement business change. So this is worth 6 marks. So give everyone a couple of minutes to have a go at this. Okay, I'm gonna start going through this question just because I am wary of time, but hopefully you had the chance to at least plan out or to have a think about how you would tackle this question. In terms of how the marking is broken down, you're going to get 1 mark for your definition or explanation of the theory and how it contributes to successful business change. 5 marks will then be allocated towards you briefly outlining each of the 5 disciplines of the theory. So this is an example. I'm not going to read it extensively. The slides are available to you. So once you have maybe fully attempted the answer, you could always go back and read this sample response to have a look at, what a good response looks like. Okay, let's have a look at the next theory. So we then have Lewin's 3-step change model. This is a theory that outlines the steps a business should take when implementing changes to its business practices so that change is long lasting. So now we're actually looking at how a business can actually implement change into the business to ensure that it is successfully implemented. And so it has 3 steps, and those are unfreeze, movement, and refreeze. Unfreeze is the first step in this model, and it refers to the preparation undertaken by the business prior to implementing the change. And so a business that is unfreezing will follow the following process. It will first determine what needs to be changed, then ensure that there's some sort of support from higher management, from senior management, and then once that's achieved, then actually create the need for change through communication to stakeholders. And by communicating that need for change to stakeholders, in some way, shape, or form, there is going to be a bit of resistance, but that allows the business to actually address and minimize concerns and resistance. So even if there are some concerns, they are able to tackle that beforehand, make sure that it's addressed, and sort of seek to minimize that. And this all occurs in anticipation of the change. It allows to foster that anticipation of change to occur. And then we have movement. So movement is the actual implementation of the change and the transition from old business practices to new ones. So now we're actually transitioning from the business's old ways to the change itself and to the new ones. And this is definitely the stage where where the business will get a lot of resistance. It's a period of confusion and fear. And to reduce that, the business could provide support and training, be open and honest in its communication, and also even empower its staff to make them feel included and to make them feel supported. And then lastly, the last step is refreezing. This is the consolidation of changes into the business's culture to ensure that the change is implemented into the long-term future. And so it just looks at creating a sense of stability with the new changes so that old practices aren't reverted back to. But this stage just looks at ensuring that whatever changes being implemented is long lasting and will last into the long-term future. So it's all about embedding the changes into the corporate culture, and the strategies that a business can take to refreeze is by celebrating success, by recognizing positive employee behavior, things like that. Okay. Then we have how a business could actually overcome employee resistance. So to reduce employee resistance to change, they can use either low risk or high risk strategies. And so a low risk strategies we have 4 low risk strategies, which are communication, support, incentives, and empowerment. High risk strategies are manipulation and threat. So for example, suppose your teacher wants you to change your BizMan classes so that they're more collaborative. Collaborating and hearing everyone's insight is a great way of increasing your understanding. It is an additional tool that has a proven record of success. So that would link to communication because, it's all about communicating how, hearing other people's insights and using them to increase your understanding. And if they say, I'll help you guys ensure that there is thorough and productive discussion. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So that would be an example of them supporting you in doing that because, they're providing that verbal support and they are saying that if you have any issues, if you if you have any issues, if you have any difficulties, they'll be there to support you. But then if they say collaboration is the only way you can boost your marks in BizMan, so if you don't want to participate, it's your funeral. So that's manipulation, because they're kind of manipulating you to do something that by hanging something over your head. So yeah, that's an example of manipulation. If they say each group member can brainstorm one practice question for you to work on collaboratively, that's empowerment. So kind of just looking at how the business can empower individuals, maybe giving them extra responsibility, giving them a bit more work, making them a bit more involved in the change itself. That would be empowerment. If they say, I hear you complain, I'll ban you from future BizMan classes, that's threat. So again, a direct consequence if you do not, I guess, abide by that behavior. Whichever group shows the most improvement in the BizMan SAC will get a free lunch. So that's incentives, because if you do this, you get X. That's all about incentives. So in terms of low strategies, this generates employee commitment, not just compliance. So the idea of commitment versus compliance is really important, because low risk strategies, because they are looking at more so building the relationship, there's a lot more commitment that's generated from employees. And so it's going to contribute to a strong positive corporate culture with reduced hostility and also long-term motivation from employees as well. However, every employee is different within a business, and so that simply might not be enough to motivate some employees. So there's always that element as well. Then we have high-risk strategies. These are highly effective because you get quick and immediate results and behavioral changes. However, constant and regular use of high-risk strategies is not sustainable because it develops a hostile and bitter culture, and there's also potential legal problems. If you're constantly being threatened at work, staff are gonna, raise ethical concerns, and they might even, provide formal complaints, which could end up in lawsuits for the business. It also generates employee compliance, not commitment. So compliance just means that they're going to be motivated in the short term. They're just going to be complying in the short term, but they're not going to be committed in the long term. Okay, last run, I believe. So this is, now we're looking at change and how it's going to impact our stakeholders. So Vico wants us to know how change at a business affects these 5 stakeholders. We can break them down by concern regarding the change and the positive and negative impacts of change as well. So we'll underline what these stakeholders are concerned by the change, or like what their concern is with change, and then also how it might positively and negatively impact them. So with managers, their key concern is going to be around uncertainty regarding changes in their roles/jobs and authority and high stress levels. And so ways that they might be positively impacted by change is they might be recognized for effort. There might be a reevaluation and development of new management styles or skills and new opportunities. Just keep in mind, when I go through the positive and negative impacts of change, these are not ones, I feel like it will definitely, when you have a specific change, and in the context of a SAC or exam, when you're presented with a specific change, and if you're asked to describe how stakeholders might be affected by the change, it can be a lot more different. So these are just generic ones that tend to be fitting for most kinds of change, but just keep in mind that you definitely need to keep in mind what the change is, and that should shape how that stakeholder is positively or negatively impacted. In terms of how managers might be negatively impacted by change, so they might have reduced responsibilities, there might be a rocky transition, maybe it wasn't carried out appropriately, there might be some resentment, distrust, and also high stress. Then we have employees, and so their uncertainty would be changes to job tasks. Does it mean that they have more or less job responsibilities? Their job security, will they lose their job? Required skills, training, and hours/place of work. Potential positive impacts of the change, so more exciting work, Maybe there's going to be removal of unsafe and repetitive tasks, new positions, promotion opportunities, better conditions. Potential negative impacts of the change is that there might be some form of redundancy. They might lose their job, loss of job, and loss of income. Stress and fear that requires support and counseling. So you can see that there's a lot of mental impacts that employees are subjected to potentially. Then we have our customers. So with customers, the concern with them is that the business's product or service will become inaccessible to the customer or will no longer suit their requirements. So if the change maybe is increasing quality or changing the features of a product, then that brings the concern of customers, because if they're using a product and it works for them, they're happy with it, and if the business suddenly changes it, they're going to be concerned about that because they might not suit their requirements. And so the potential positive impacts of change in customers is that maybe they're being given greater quality products. Maybe they're also, there's lower prices. They're having to spend less to buy what they usually buy. Customers are attracted to CSR-based changes. So maybe it's the business, introducing some social responsibility considerations. And so customers are going to feel a lot more good about the purchase when they buy from that business. The potential negative impacts and change, however, on customers is that quality has been sacrificed for price. So if there has been a reduction of price, maybe quality has also decreased, but it could also work the other way. So if quality has increased, then price might also have increased as well. Customers are unable to purchase the product. So it could also be the situation of discontinuation. I know in a lot of instances, there is the chance of products being discontinued. Maybe it's a menu item that you really like, but now it's being discontinued and customers are no longer able to purchase it. Then we have suppliers. So suppliers, their concern is that the change might result in a decline or loss of relationship between the business and the supplier. Positive impacts, suppliers might experience an increase in demand, which means that they'll have assurance that they will constantly supply to the business if the business is successful, and so that's going to help with their own success and growth. And then potential negative impacts is that if the change has been poorly executed, the supplier might feel vulnerable and fearful. Maybe the business has not been successful and suppliers are now scared that they're not going to be paid. If just in time, orders might be more spontaneous, so it requires a lot of responsibility on the suppliers to keep up to date with when orders are coming in. If the change is developing an economy of scale, increased pressure on supplier to confirm the business's demand. So sort of keeping up with the business's demand, might put a bit of pressure on them. Okay, then we have the general community. So general community, they're concerned with if the change will cause negative environmental impacts or negative job impacts. Positive impacts of change, so if the change is more successful, business is more successful, the likely chance that the business will employ more people. So if the business is more successful, maybe they're getting more jobs, they're growing. Successful business also means more tax. So that means more tax paid to the government, which can be reinvested into the community, build stronger infrastructure, education, healthcare, social recreational centers. And change could even be CSR, it could be social responsibility. So maybe that the business is directly positively impacting the community. The negative impacts of change, so redundancy means that there's going to be lower employment, there's going to be reduced employment, and so loss of jobs. Change might also involve socially irresponsible behavior, increased waste, outsourcing, sweatshops. So that's quite negative. Okay, CSR is the commitment by and corporate social responsibility is a commitment by an organization to conduct its businesses in an ethical manner that exceeds legal requirements and aims to minimize negative impact on the environment, society, and the economy, as well as other stakeholders. So fairly, you hopefully should have seen this definition before. So CSR is all about going above and beyond legal requirements. And so in terms of change, CSR can be implemented in two forms. The changes themselves could be socially responsible, so by maybe introducing biodegradable packaging, using more energy efficient, solar panels, resources, or the stakeholders should be treated ethically throughout the change process. It's kind of looking at those involved in the change. So maybe providing free counseling and support to employees and other stakeholders, open communication, all of that. Okay, there is a practice question. I'll come back to this if we have time. I'm just going to go through some exam stuff. So there are 4 key elements that you need to look at when you're confronted with a question in the exam. So it's really important that you do know your task words, just because this is the part of the question that will tell you how you craft your answer, give you an indication of how what you need to include in your answer. So for example, you have your evaluate, discuss, critically evaluate, identify. Content words are really important. They tell you which section of the study design you should be looking towards and what you need to be including in your answer, what you might be needing to define. Limiting words are also important as they tell you what not to write. So for example, a question might say, come up with 1 example of a quality management strategy. So if you come up with 2, that's not what the question is asking. So really important that you underline your limiting words. Mark and time allocation. As an average rule, in an end of year exam, it's approximately 1.5 minutes per mark. So it's really important that you pace yourself. 10 marker tips. So it's important that you do plan before you write. If you write immediately, it's likely that your answer doesn't have any structure. So 10 markers, normally try to approach it like an essay, have an introduction, have your body paragraphs, and when you are planning it, try to plan, okay, what am I going to include in my body paragraph 1, 2, etc. Break down the question. Often with 10-mark questions, there's also going to be multiple parts of the question. So even just draw like brackets or use different highlighters to help you, see that you've answered all the elements of the question. And also have a sentence to open up and conclude your 10-marker. So in some form, you should, open up your 10-marker, but also conclude it. So you could use an intro or conclusion as well. So these do tend to be the most challenging parts of the BizMan exam as seen by the previous examiner's report. Okay, this is a bit of a breakdown of a previous 10-mark question. I'll quickly go through it. I think this might have been 2017. Yes, 2017. But yeah, kind of sheds light on, a lot of students only evaluated technology when the focus should have been on the word only. So kind of underlines how you need to really take note of literally every single word in the question. A large proportion of students evaluated technology as a means of improving productivity, competitiveness, and effectiveness, whereas you had to just evaluate technology as the only means of improving productivity. So there's a little distinction, so just being mindful of the way the question is worded. With your 10-mark question, there's not going to be any clear marking allocation, but you can kind of break it down in this area. They just mark it on the basic quality of your response. So you could break it down like this. So how productivity, competitiveness, and effectiveness is have each paragraph for productivity, competitiveness, and effectiveness. Each paragraph you're showing how technology can improve competitiveness, but then also comparing it to something else, and how that can improve effectiveness as well. And then ultimately have your evaluative statements. And these are some other things that could also improve business performance that you could include in your answer. And then in terms of like your study tips and time management, it's really important that you get the knowledge, you take time to understand it, but then the most important part and the thing that will help you to actually consolidate your understanding is actually applying it. And in applying it, that's just doing practice questions and practice exams and understanding, where you went wrong, reading sample answers, all of that. So the first and unfortunately most unhelpful tip is that everyone is different. So with study tips, you kind of just have to see what works for you, and because what worked for me might not be necessarily the best for you. So it's just about trial and error. But these are some strategies that you could potentially try. So there's flashcards, there's one-page summaries. I found one-page summaries really helpful because I felt like I was very much a visual person. Even just like explaining it to your family or like a friend Timed practice exams, that's also a very important one. Using examiner's report, that's also very important. Seeing what mistakes were made in the past so that you can be mindful of not doing that in your exam. And also scheduling, trying to be very good with your time management, organizing what you're going to complete on what day to ensure that you're making the most out of your time. And even just using your teachers. If you're unsure about anything, if you need some advice, reaching out to them would be a good idea as well. All right, amazing. So that brings us to the end of our lesson. I hope this lecture was helpful. And yeah, congrats. You finished all of the content for Year 12 BizMan. And if you did have any questions, do please put them into our chat and I will have a go at answering them. All right, enjoy the rest of your holidays, everyone, and I will see you next time.